our former principal trumpet player. He had a good friend in the audience, and he got a report. He said he sounded good, but in that chorale at the end, it sounded like he was playing it a little louder than the trombones. I said, yeah, it's like really hard to play very, very soft when you're like shaking like that.
Hi everyone, welcome to OSA Backstage. I'm Danny Meyer, and on this episode we talk to Principal Tuba Craig Fuller about his 46 years with the Omaha Symphony. That's right, 4-6. Craig's career has been absolutely phenomenal. We talked to him about all the things, including Frankentubas, Darlene Love, and why he likes Elgar and Tubby the Tuba so much. Spoiler alert, you will too. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the episode. Okay, Craig.
Okay.
We start the same way with everybody.
Okay.
Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Craig Fuller. I'm the principal tuba player in the Omaha Symphony, and I started in the symphony in 1978.
Okay, so let's do some math. That's 22 plus 24, so 46 years?
46 years, right.
Oh my god, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
How's that feel?
It's been fun. I mean, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed playing a lot of the great masterworks of symphonic repertoire and the opera repertoire. Mm-hmm. So it's been good. We've been trying to ask everybody this question. We've had mixed results. Do you remember your first orchestra concert? I do. We played Symphony Fantastique. I don't remember. In that first season, I do remember John Browning being a soloist, and the new piano that is now the orchestra's piano was used for the first time. So that was your first Omaha Symphony concert? Yes. Okay, what about your first ever? We've had Tiny Tots going on field trips. We've had high school.
They were playing flute and went to a flute concert.
Buffalo Philharmonic, James Galway. Well, I somehow organized when I was in high school for the Columbus Symphony to come and play at my high school. And I organized for the brass quintet to come and also the full orchestra to play. And I don't know. Columbus Symphony, Ohio? Yes. So in high school, you brought them to you. Yeah, I was. That's awesome. I was involved in student council, student government, and got that organized to get the brass quintet there to play for the high school, and then later the whole orchestra came. They had community concerts, and I got the administration to get that going. So nothing has changed? I suppose not. You're exactly the same person. Okay, so obviously you were already playing tuba at that point. Were playing brass? I was playing tuba by then. I started playing the trumpet when I was in 5th grade, and then I switched to the tuba because my band director said, you really can't play the high notes, but you're good at the low notes. And then if you switch to the tuba, you'll be first chair because I'll be the only chair. Yep. Yep. It seems like nothing in between. You're just going to go right down. Right then. Was he right? Yes. Yeah. It did help. I wasn't able to play the high notes on the trumpet, just something about the way my lips worked, and then I just gravitated to the tuba, and they pulled me to the high school band when I was in 7th grade, I think. So. Okay, yeah. So you were doing something right from the get-go. I think. What was the most surprising thing about switching? Were you already reading music at that time? I mean, obviously trumpet, but had you played piano? It's a totally different clef. It's a totally different. Right. It just flipped on, and it seemed pretty easy, to me at that change. I hadn't played piano yet. I only started piano when I was in 12th grade because I knew I was going to go to music school and I better learn something about it, although I was never very good at it. So. Piano, did you have to learn piano when you went to music school?
Yes, we had to take mandatory piano and pass a test in order to graduate. Was that the same? Well, you played piano.
I played piano, so I luckily tested out.
I'm sure you did.
But but I remember being surprised that was a requirement, that you had to play some basic piano. And then we started lessons, and I realized that my teacher was accompanying me in lessons. So this is a skill that you should keep up.
It's a skill that I wish I had, but I was never very good at typing or playing the piano. I can do this hand or I can do this hand, but doing it together was almost impossible.
Well, good thing you play one-handed.
Yes,
Essentially
true.
one-handed. But that's not. I mean, that's kind of true. What is okay? So brief tuba explanation, because I apparently know nothing about wind and brass instruments. You obviously have the valves.
Right, on the right hand.
Okay, on the right hand. So what's the left hand doing?
Well, you adjust some slides so that hopefully you play in tune better with other people, because changing the valves, there's always some compromise in how the notes play on the instrument. So you have to adjust a little bit. I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to play together with other people and sound good, you need to adjust the slide now and then.
How quickly do you learn that lesson when you're starting a brass instrument? Because obviously every instrument has to adjust to a degree. Pianists can't. Anything that has a fixed intonation, there's really nothing you can do in the moment except hold
Right.
on. But
Well, it's only when I got a professional quality instrument when I was in probably 11th grade that I started to have to do that adjustments.
and you were at that point able to hear.
Well, your teacher said, that note is flat, that note is sharp, you need to adjust,
Okay. And then when you started playing in a quality section, did that become more clear as you were listening, as you were?
Sure. Yeah, you become more attuned to that, I hope. I think that your ear, gravitates. The better groups you play with, the more finely tuned it is, I think.
And weirdly, you would think that the better the group, the less you would have to do that. But I think it's the opposite.
Yeah, well, I got to play in the Chicago Symphony for a week, and I'm playing along, and I'm like, oh, I hear something out of tune. Oh, it's me! So I hadn't moved my tuning slide like this much, and it's like, whoa, yeah. So that horizon of pitch gets more refined the more you go up the pay scale.
What was that like? What was the concert? What was the repertoire?
We did a piece by, it was a brand new piece by Bert Whistle, English composer who just recently passed away. It had 2 tubas. And so I had known Gene Picorni for a pretty long time. We were kind of buds. He's been to Omaha because his family is from here. And although he never lived here, but his cousins live here. Mm-hmm. So he asked me to play. I'm like, yeah, I should probably do that. My friends in the symphony are like, you have to do that. And then it's all good until he got sick in the second concert, and I then had to play Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony without a rehearsal and be the only tuba, and that was interesting and scary.
But interesting and
Wow.
scary. Do you think you can give yourself a realistic score for how you did?
No, I don't. I was like so in the moment. It was so, and.
But you had played.
Sorry?
You had played.
I had played Tchaikovsky's Symphony number 6 many times, but then, it was with Barenboim, and he's not the most clear conductor, so it was a challenge. I'd been to the rehearsals some, and so I saw the challenges were.
And that is interesting. To come in when someone is sick and you're subbing in the last moment, you have absolutely no preparation except the fact that you were observing rehearsals. There is kind of a focus that comes from that.
There is.
I think sometimes the first time you do that is easier than if you had to do repeat performances after, because then you get in your head about what went well and what didn't.
Right. Well, one of our former principal trumpet player, he had a good friend in the audience, and he got a report. He said he sounded good. But in that chorale at the end, it sounded like he was playing it a little louder than the trombones. I said, yeah, it's like really hard to play very, very soft when you're like shaking like that. So, and those guys play really soft. I mean, they were really challenging themselves to play it softer and softer. So.
Oh, so you just got to go along for the ride on that.
I did, Yeah.
How easy is it for you to tell how loud you are compared to the rest of the brass section? Because we were talking to Lisa Meyerhofer about the piccolo, and it's almost impossible for her to gauge, just because piccolo is so naturally loud.
Yeah, It's difficult. I mean, I listen to recordings, and like when the hall opened, my friend Gene McCartney from the Chicago Symphony was here in the hall and he wanted to play my horns in the hall, and I wanted to hear him play my horns in the hall so I'd get an idea of what it sounded like. Not that we sound the same, but we play similar instruments and similar equipment. So that's all in part of the learning process, and listening to recordings that the orchestra makes, I think, is important as well.
So it's almost like it becomes a muscle memory exercise. It's like you know how much you're pushing in certain capacities, and then you can extrapolate from there.
I think so. I mean, I think you build kind of a memory of what you sound like out front. I mean, it's really important to have a concept of what it sounds like out front, as well as what it sounds like where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's usually different. It certainly is different on our stage, that what you hear on stage is not exactly what the audience hears. It's, once you get out your sound out in the hall, it's kind of very resonant out in the hall, which is good. It beats the alternative, which was, when we played in the Orpheum, it wasn't resonant at all. And you had to push the whole time to get the fortes to be forte. You don't really have to do that in this hall.
How much of an adjustment, how long did it take for you to make that adjustment? Because we've been in this hall for nearly 20 years.
Yes.
And this is your 46th season with the symphony. So you had 26 seasons before that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't change equipment. I thought about it at some point. I mean, because there was my tuba maker is the Hirschberger family. And they have a medium-sized tuba that I tried in the Orpheum, and it didn't do anything. And that's when I got the largest instrument they play. But if I considered going back to that medium-sized instrument some of the time, at least. I have 3 tubas that I play regularly in the symphony.
Okay.
An F tuba, which is higher pitched, kind of between tuba and baritone, and I play that mostly for solos or for Berlioz. And then I have a medium-sized tuba that is a German instrument, and I play that in my brass quintet and some pops concerts. And then I have the big tuba, which is the most common instrument you hear and see in American symphony orchestras.
Okay, so that's mostly your masterworks.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the Tchaikovsky, Mahler, Brahms, Strauss instrument.
Between the F you said, so we'll probably see the F for Tubby.
Yes.
In your Family 2 solo.
Right.
Which is awesome. How do you said you almost went back to the medium sized for the Holland. Is that because you were worried about naturally overpowering, or you just thought that might be a more natural?
Right. I just thought that would, kind of fit into the resonance of the hall. The sound of it didn't go anywhere in the Orpheum. It just kind of sat on the stage, and I had people play, and listen, and nobody was impressed with it. So I just, went back to the bigger. That's when I went to the bigger tuba.
Okay.
Is there much of an adjustment when you go between tubas, or does the mouthpiece stay the same? Is there anything with the technique you have to change?
Well, I think you just, you grow into doing it. I mean, the mouthpiece is similar. I play mouthpieces on both instruments that were made by the same person, so that the rim is similar. But my big tuba and the small tuba are both Hirschberger instruments, and they both have some of the same playing
tendencies.
Tendencies and kind of sound concept in a way.
Is that a thing with tubas, that they can have there can be challenges with certain instruments, like regardless of who's playing it, or?
Oh sure, oh yeah, absolutely. There's some instruments like Czech instruments that sound really great, but there are some overtones that are almost impossible to manage. You have to play strange fingerings to get them to work. And
do they sound different? as well?
Yeah, they do. The Czech instruments I'm thinking about sound really good, but they're difficult to play.
Do you ever chase that kind of sound when you're playing Czech music? Like if you're playing Dvorak Symphony or anything like that?
Yeah, well, my medium-sized tuba is a German instrument, which is closely related to the Czech instruments. They're all made in the same area of Bavaria, Czech. That's all in the same area. And I play it sometimes, like the last time we did Brahms' Second Symphony, the trombones, we call it downsizing. They play somewhat smaller instruments, and I played the German kind of instrument, so we would have a similar sound, more of a Germanic sound in this section.
Interesting.
Pat does talk about that. It's the dream is to have a section with the same maker, or at least like the same neck of the woods for a Brahms, a Schumann, or Mendelssohn, something that gives it that beautiful Bavarian sound.
Yeah, it's a different sound, and part of it is the difference in the way you play it too. So a little bit more round, a little, that kind of sound concept rather than, Tchaikovsky brass band, Shostakovich, kind of brass band concept. We never try to blare, but we do try to sound like a Russian military orchestra at times when it's called for.
Okay, so that I've always wondered about this. At what point were you, because you invited the Columbus Symphony Brass Quintet in, you got the Columbus Symphony to your neck of the woods, right? But at what point did you start seriously listening to recordings or studying orchestra brass sections? Because I'm a bass player, and even I know the Chicago Symphony brass is weapon. Or, you don't want to mess with like the Philadelphia section or the New York section. They kind of wield these sounds that become famous.
Sure.
Did you have any of those in mind? Were you listening to specific?
Sure. Well, probably when I was a senior in high school, I started listening to recordings, and I saw the Philadelphia Orchestra in Veterans Memorial Auditorium, and I can't remember the whole program, but it had Daphnis and Chloe on it. It was like a 2.5-hour program. The Philadelphia Orchestra is kind of famous for that. And so I heard that. We started checking recordings out of the library. These were records then, by the way. This is way before CDs. And I certainly listened to the Chicago Symphony and some Berlin Philharmonic recordings as well. And at some point, I started listening and knowing about the tuba player in the Cleveland Orchestra, who became one of my important teachers. His name was Ronald Bishop. And I started to go up and have some lessons with him, and heard the orchestra. I would always, stay and hear the orchestras about, I don't know how far from my house. It was completely across Columbus and then up to Cleveland. It was a few hours drive. But then I became aware of his playing, and frankly, they didn't have a real strong trombone section. They had a really strong bass trombone player and a really strong tuba player, and they kind of set the tone for me.
Okay. What was it like to take lessons from someone you heard on a record? Because that to me would have been.
Yeah, well, he played some in his lessons, so that was good. I mean, he played things for me, and I studied with him for literally years. Even when I I got this job in Omaha, I still would go back and have a lesson, or I had a lesson in Omaha one time when the Cleveland Orchestra played here.
Yeah, that's right. They occasionally did. Yeah.
Wow.
Did tours, yeah.
They toured, and that must have been like 1982. They were here, 83.
So I'm dying to know, because we've heard that the Elgar Symphony No. 1 was played in Omaha at some point. Have you played Elgar's first symphony?
No, it's
here?
one that's on my list. If they played it, it was before 1978.
All right, so we have a better date now.
Yeah.
So I have a spreadsheet. Everything after 1990, I know what we've played, and there's no Elgar 1 on it, and I did not think I saw it on the pre-1990 printed spreadsheet that was gifted to me when I started this job.
Oh, okay.
Alistair Neal, though, thinks that we've played it. So it could have been right before you started. So
We're trying to pinpoint
Yeah.
if there's anyone in the orchestra who has played Elgar 1 before.
No, I haven't. It's
Okay.
one of the pieces that's on my bucket list.
Oh, I
Really?
know.
So I think I've recommended it a couple times.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a huge tuba part or anything, but it's a really nice piece, and we play, Enigma variations. We've probably done that like 5 times since I've been in the orchestra, but I think this is probably an equally important and excellent piece. It's just kind of long.
It is long. I think it's
It's got to be programmed in the right place, right?
exactly. What attracts you to Elgar's musical language, though? Because this isn't the only Elgar that you've talked to me about. We've talked about In the South. We've
Right.
talked about some of his other overtures. What about him?
Well, I think he's Elgar and later Vaughan Williams kind of quintessentially English to me. It just sounds like that stoic kind of feel. And, my family's English. We've been to, Judith and I, my wife, have been to the church where my family is from and saw the family crest in the windows, which was like amazing.
Oh man! So it's the keep calm and carry on tradition.
Yeah, so I have an affinity for England. We've been, 4 or 5, 6 times, and a lot more than we've been anywhere else. But we want to go back,
Well, home means something. Like it
Yeah.
makes it just even more special than just a chance to go abroad. I think.
Right, and we are, we've done a lot of gardening, and I've been involved with historic preservation, and England is the headquarters of both of those things.
Wow.
So you're making recommendations. So when musicians make recommendations, I'm always curious. Like, are you bringing this to me because it has a specific, amazing tuba, violin, flute, whatever part, or is it just as a musician, as a person who loves classical music, I want us to do this? And it seems like you're in the latter camp. I'm sure the tuba part's great, but
It's nice, sure, but there are no solos or anything like that. It's just an English piece that's so quintessentially English, and Elgar was such an important composer, I feel, and it's very melodic, songful, but yet uses some challenging harmonic language. It's not like straight ahead, so I like it. It's enjoyable to listen to.
it'll be a treat. I want to circle real quick back to Cleveland
Mhm.
and your teacher. What in his sound were you grabbed by? Because you have I always enjoy listening to you play as part of the section, especially because it's a very thoughtful but like mellow, round, warm approach to the tuba.
Well, thank you.
What did you hear from Cleveland?
Well, Mr. Bishop played an Alexander tuba, which is about half of the instrument that I play. I play an Alexander bell on a mirrophone tuba, and it
Brass
has
instruments are so weird.
Yeah.
Sorry.
yeah, it's a Frankenstein tuba, but he had a very round sound. He varied his articulations a lot depending on what he played. My favorite recording of his is Prokofiev, the full Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet, recording with the Cleveland Orchestra, which is monumentally great.
Mm-hmm. So you were someone who approached every single piece differently, and
Right, I think so. I mean, when you hear him play, one of the greatest recordings is with Zell. They did Bruckner 8th Symphony in his first week in the orchestra. He was in San Francisco and then went to Cleveland, and it's a remarkable width of sound. It just carried the whole
the whole hall. It's so resonant. I mean, I think some of that is, he said the recording engineers put about so much dB boost on the bass that, but I think some of that is true. But I could just, in my brain, I have this, and I play this one little lick from it, and just to see if I can get some kind of semblance of that resonance that he got out of the instrument.
Oh, I love that. That's okay. Those are the moments where, like, if I could just, like you said, if I could just do a percentage of that, I would be so happy. So when you're teaching, because you've been teaching as long as you've been playing here in Omaha.
I have.
Is that something that you impart to your students? Do you had them listen to recordings? Do you have them attend concerts? How do you give them what you discovered listening to those records?
Well, I play a lot for my students when I teach, and I also give them some listening assignments along the way, some orchestra pieces I think they should know, and some crazy, weird, assignments too. I mean, I have them all listen to this Darlene Love song when she just flows a melody out and it just keeps going and going, and so when she came to Omaha, I was like in heaven, just what a sweetheart, and what an incredible singer, and the use of air, the use of projection. So that's one of the things I always play for my students, and I always have my students listen to Fischer Dieskau because of the intelligent music making is like none other. So Fischer Dieskau is, I think one of the most important things I did in college, other than taking lessons, was going to the music library, because you couldn't check out recordings like you can today, and listening to Fischer Dieskau while looking at the music. I mean, he just transcends the black and white into life like no other single musician I know.
Do you feel like the tuba represents your musical voice? Do you think of singing your part and thinking of your part as like a singer would, almost?
I do, but a lot more when I'm a soloist, because I haven't done recitals in a while, but when I'm a soloist, I think a lot more about singing the parts. But when I'm playing in the orchestra, I think you have to fit it's a little bit more, I hate to say prescribed, but unless you have solo, which you don't very often playing the tuba, you have a job of being the foundation of the brass section, certainly, and sometimes, like in Prokofiev Fifth Symphony, the foundation of the woodwinds and the horns and other parts of the orchestra.
Wow. So you have to provide something steady then, so that everyone
You
can
have
feel.
to, you can't be going off and taking too much liberty with the tempo, and you've got to kind of fit in with everybody else.
How able are you to listen across then? Like, let's take the Prokofiev 5 example,
right,
where you are literally, you've got you're here, you've got winds over here, you've got horns all the way over there. How much are you able to hear in real time and adjust? Or are you sticking primarily with the conductor and laying it down knowing that they'll build on top of you?
You have to do some of both. And the first thing that I tell people when they ask me about the hall is there's a lot of sound on stage, and the good news is everything is there, but it takes a real lot of focus to hear individual things. Like the bassoons are there. I can hear them, but there's a lot of other sound around it, so you really got to focus on the parts that you need to hear, you should hear.
So it's a lot more knowing. This is coming up again and again. It's not enough for you to know your part. You have to know in context what's going on around you, sometimes better than your part. Sometimes percussionists talk about this a lot, that you walk in and you almost have to know the score as well as the conductor does.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I do some score study. It just depends on which piece it is, but I know the 100 pieces that we do, most of the the standard symphonic repertoire I've played pretty much all of it, I would say. Some of it numerous times, like Tchaikovsky symphonies. The one Brahms symphony we play on, the Sibelius wrote 2 symphonies with great tuba parts, and then he had a bad experience and didn't write any more tuba parts in the rest of his symphony. So it was kind of way too bad.
Is there a Bernstein story that's similar? Didn't Bernstein also not like his tuba player?
I don't know.
I'm making that up.
I think I know what you're talking about. Something like he had written it, but that tuba, yeah, he had some personal something, and he rewrote the part for a different instrument. Either that, or it was the opposite. He ended up rewriting a part and giving it to tuba.
Oh, I do know that story.
Oh,
okay. So I have it backwards.
So it was in West Side Story, and my teacher Harvey Phillips was the tuba player on Broadway, West Side Story. And so he was kind of they were just kind of goofing around, and he played a little lick that was, I think, a trumpet part. And Bernstein said, "I like that better," and he changed it to be a tuba part. I don't know exactly where that. I mean, I have not played the whole. I have not played the whole West Side Story in the pit or anything. So yeah, that did happen.
Okay.
Wow.
I like that version.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't like to have tuba parts deleted from great composers.
No, it sounds better on tuba. Tuba deserves its own voice. That's the whole, I guess, story behind Tubby the Tuba.
It sort of is.
As well, Yeah.
Interesting thing about Tubby the Tuba is when it was first performed, it was first recorded, the record came out and it listed the narrator and the conductor, but it didn't list the soloist. It's like too close to the real. Yeah, can you believe that?
I mean, what role does the conductor really do? They're not making any sound, but Tubby the Tuba. Oh no!
Yeah, that's kind of the whole story of the thing.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, you can't make that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's so ironic.
It is.
That just.
How many times have you done Tubby with us?
This is the 4th time I did it. Maybe my 2nd year in the symphony.
Wow.
With Dave Wingert as a narrator, and then we did it again with Dave. I don't know, maybe like 8 years ago, and then we did it with Adam, maybe like 6 years ago. We've done it a fair number of times, but it's always fun.
What's the level of preparation? You just did the Vaughan Williams concerto with us a season or so ago. What's the level of preparation for a Tubby versus a standard tuba concerto?
Well, Tubby the Tuba is kind of high for the melody goes up to an F, which is about the highest, close to the highest note in the volumes. So it's a little on the high side, and it's kind of all over the instrument. It has some low stuff when Tubby talks about playing his low notes. He has some low, like, bass line stuff as well. So it's mostly getting your high range on the F tuba cranked up, and
Was that the same tuba then that you used for the Vaughan Williams as well?
It is.
Okay.
So solo tuba. That's
or I use the same tuba playing like Berlioz, because Berlioz had a different idea of what the tuba would sound like in Wagner, like Prelude to the Third Act, which we are playing on a different concert. That would involve F tuba. In Germany, that's called bass tuba, and when you play the big tuba, that's called contrabass tuba, and it says that on the parts. It's weird, even some Bruckner symphonies, like 7 and 8, 2 of the movements are for bass tuba and 2 of the movements are for contrabass tuba.
Would you just combine them both into one instrument? Can you combine them both?
Probably. I would probably play them. Most people play them on the big tuba.
Have you ever played the whole symphony on 2 different tubas, using 2 different tubas?
Sure, like Rite of Spring. Yeah, we use pretty much everybody uses 2 different tubas for the Rite of Spring, because there are some very high parts and there's some very low parts, so you pretty much have to.
I think about other things. There's some John Williams that has Jaws has a big, and also the Jabba the Hutt solo.
That's right. Those are some of my favorite solos actually in the entire movie, right? Because the Jabba the Hutt one is so, and even the Jaws, it's so dexterous, and just requires this like leaping around. I don't know what it looks like to execute, but to hear it, it's like you're imagining a string instrument is like going back and forth. Yeah.
It does get around. You think of the half-step theme and Jaws, and we do have that, but it's the solo that you have with the French horn that is the way more difficult part of the piece.
Why do you think you put that in tuba? Do you think it's because there's that kind of like foghorn underwater quality to a tuba sound, especially when you combine it with the French horn?
Yeah, I don't know, but he did some of that in his concerto. He wrote a concerto for the tuba just after what was Chester Schmitt's, the tuba player in the Boston Symphony, when John Williams was the conductor of the Boston Pops, and said, "Gee, you've wrote a part of the tuba concerto here. Why don't you continue and make it like a lot longer?" And so he did, and it has some of those same. The second movement of that concerto has some of the same kind of French horn, tuba parts that are you play all together. So,
how, when you're introducing, when you have a student who you can see is doing well, at what point do you unleash a John Williams concerto or a solo like this on them?
Well, I've had some graduate students that have played the John Williams concerto was very difficult. I mean, I said that when I played it with on a Masterworks set in 1984, maybe 86, at the Orpheum, I said it took me a lot longer to learn it than it took him to write it. I'm sure. Well, I was just learning how to play the F tuba, and I learned how to play the F tuba on that concerto, which was kind of a double whammy.
Okay.
Because it's a difficult concerto. But I've had graduate students that have played the John Williams. I think the tuba player in the Lincoln Symphony, Golden Lund, just played it like 3 years ago, and I had introduced him to it when he was a graduate student. So it's a difficult one. I've had some students, win the concerto competition in Lincoln on the Vaughan Williams and the Gregson concerto, which was also a fine concerto, mostly a band concerto. And I've had a number of euphonium players who have won the concerto competition in Lincoln.
How often do you play euphonium?
I don't play it much. I mean, I've taught it for some number of years. I know the repertoire, and I can play along with my freshmen and sophomores. But usually, people get better at it, in their junior and senior year than I could demonstrate. And I have a lot of really great euphonium recordings, which I share with my students.
Because that's in the Planets that's coming up.
Right.
That part has an extensive brass requirement. So you've got full trombone section, full trumpet, plus how many tubas?
Well, just one tuba, but there's also tenor tuba or baritone horn. I think euphonium, it's all the same instrument.
Okay.
But it's in an English brass band. There are 2 euphoniums and 2 English baritones, which are like a trombone with valves. It doesn't have. It's a kind of a narrow instrument. It has a small bell.
Okay. Because I grew up playing in wind ensembles because Delaware didn't have a ton of orchestras. So I had friends who played euphonium.
Right.
But they seem to use the terms baritone and euphonium pretty
interchangeably.
Yeah, interchangeably.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. But an English baritone is a much smaller instrument, sort of like the bridge between French horn or alto horn and
baritones, kind of like that tonal range in between. It uses a smaller mouthpiece than euphonium and plays a little higher.
Okay, so it's even between above trombone in points.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so who's playing? Is Pat playing euphonium / baritone?
We don't know yet for sure.
Okay,
but
it's planets.
Yeah.
That part is a lot. It's a lot of fun. The whole planets for the brass section is a lot of fun.
It's a great piece. A lot of fun to play.
It does have and so the Holst obviously is another British composer, and there's that brass band tradition over in England.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, are all tuba players like you in the sense that they want to foster a tuba choir, euphonium choir? Because that's one of your legacies here in Omaha too, is you have a tuba choir and a euphonium choir. You've made it a tradition to do tuba Christmas.
Right. My teacher, Harvey Phillips, started that. It goes on throughout the world, and we continue it in Omaha. We did it in Lincoln when I taught there. I don't know if they're still doing it. And then as part of the curriculum, we had a tuba ensemble that met weekly in Lincoln, mostly majors, but I let a few non-majors come in if they were serious about it. And then we did some traveling to go to conferences and things. At first I was frankly wasn't sure it fit in the curriculum, and then one of my colleagues said, my trombone colleague in Lincoln said, it really helps your guys to have kind of a studio collective sound and concept. So he thought it was good, and I just kept doing it. It's a challenge to find good repertoire that challenges them and yet sounds good. So I spent a lot of time arranging for that, so that I would give them challenges. It's not like I would give the melody to the first part all the time. I'd pass it around. And so I even did some arranging of a lyrical piece that passed it around so much that they really had to concentrate on who had the melody because it was going all over the place. So that was, I arranged a challenge for them.
That's great. Bass players do the same thing. Apparently flute players do the same thing. Do you think all instruments do this and we just don't know until we ask them? I don't think violinists do this, but they again have all the repertoire in the world written for them at all times. So
I think you're right. I think most string players tend to play in quartets, and they form their own, quartets, quintets, and things like that. But every wind and brass, I also ran a flute choir in undergrad. That was also, it was for all the non-music majors who wanted to continue playing flute because they played flute throughout high school band and all that, and then there was no opportunity anymore. And as you know, there are so many flute players that it was so easy to get people interested, and that we always had lots of new people every year. Yeah,
I think the more artistic group for brass is a brass quintet or a brass choir, like the Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, or brass quintets. I grew up, in my old time here in Omaha, I've played a lot of brass quintet stuff, which I think is more feasible artistically, more easily attainable, high artistic level on a brass quintet than a tuba ensemble, just because of the kind of limited range. But I think it can still sound good, and it's a challenge to make it sound good, it's a good thing, because you have to play differently in a tuba ensemble than you play in a brass choir or an orchestra or band. And I don't think that's bad. I think that you learn how to play your instrument better when you have to change the way you play a bit to fit into the ensemble.
Is there kind of like typical style that you tended to arrange for tuba choir? Because I'm just thinking, for flute choir, we did so much French music. Ravel and Debussy, a lot of that French, or even the stuff that they wrote for piano, we would then have arranged for flute choir. Is there anything?
We did some of that. We've done some of those kinds of things. I arranged some marches that worked well. I also arranged
kind of a monumental organ piece that was written by a composer who taught in Lincoln, and his name escapes me, but it was a published piece of music, and it worked great for tuba ensemble. Organ music works really well for tuba ensemble with, obviously some octave alterations, and you have to clear out some of the cloudiness in the middle, but organ music works really well.
Are there, for playing in a section, does your experience with tuba choirs, with brass choirs, brass quintets, does that translate over when you get to play with the same musicians in a section? If you have your Brahms choir moments, if you have your Bruckner moments, do you feel that more easily?
I think so. Well, I think any way you can, stretch yourself musically and develop more range of musical interpretation, I think the better. You are as a section player and a colleague, have big ears and listen to what other people are doing and be able to do it. I mean, that's part of it. Part of it is having the concept, and part of it is having the facility to do it. It's a combination of both.
Do you ever get to, you've talked so much about being the foundation, do you ever get to drive as a tuba player? Do you ever get to take hold of a situation and say, I am the captain now?
Probably Revueltas is the composer who would let you do that. Well, he's his area of Mexico is Sinaloa, and in Sinaloa, the tuba is the concertmaster of the Sinaloese orchestra, and that's where I think a lot of his imagination comes from. So, Homage to Garcia Lorca is one really great piece, and then there's Sensamaya and many other pieces that involve the tuba to a real great extent. I mean, it's amazing stuff to play if you're a tuba player.
I had no idea. The tuba is actually the concertmaster.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
That's
and
good.
If you listen to some of the, there's a mariachi group called Mariachi Con Tuba was one of them, and tuba players in that, and there are pretty amazing the stuff they play a lot of melody in unison, well, not in unison, in octaves with the first trumpet. I mean, you're really active in those groups, and they get all over the instrument. I mean, they're pretty amazing.
Well, there's obviously something to be said for if this is how you grew up and this is how you heard this instrument played, then of course you were going to play like that. Like the recordings of Cleveland you were listening to, it's like, well, of course this is possible, therefore I will aspire to this.
Right.
Craig, I want to be respectful of all of our time. Do you have a favorite Omaha Symphony concert from the last 46 years?
Oh boy, that's hard. Well, I'm always, I'm a Bruckner, Mahler, Strauss person, and I think playing Mahler's Second Symphony is probably in the top of my. We've done it a couple times, maybe 3 times, but probably outside this symphony in the opera realm, I think playing Porgy and Bess with John DeMaine twice was at the top of my list. John DeMaine has a Grammy for Porgy and Bess. He has a great affinity for that piece, and we had a great cast, especially the first time we did it. This was like 1988 or something.
Sorry, the lights tend to go off unless you move.
There we go. So playing Porgy and Bess, that was pretty special. And we did it twice in like subsequent years. Maybe we skipped a year, and it was magical. Truly, one of the great pieces of operatic repertoire.
I love that. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
If you were given 30 minutes, no consequences, could try any instrument on stage, not get into trouble, where are you going?
I'd love the cello, but it doesn't make enough noise for me. Probably the oboe. I mean, the idea though of holding your breath and not putting
hardly any air through. It's like totally the opposite of playing the tuba. It kind of intrigues me, I guess, a little bit. And it's played beautifully in an orchestra every day. So that's, I enjoy listening to the oboe, and I have tried to play it, and it does not go well.
I don't think it goes well for most people. Our oboe section, Sandy Rock, Heather Baxter, Christine Salas, they tend to be the exception to the.
Yeah, I love English orchestras, but that's one of the areas in English orchestras that I tend to like blank out, or the oboe playing, because it's not really very, I don't know, it's just not very good to me.
How many people can we upset at the very end of this episode? No.
Yeah.
I'd love to see you try to play the oboe.
I don't think that will happen.
Well,
I think I have a, pulmonary event if I tried to use that little air for such a long time.
After 46 years of professional tuba playing.
Yeah.
Craig, thank you very, very much.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yay.
Okay.
That was awesome. Craig,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was really fun to pick your brain. It's a very thoughtful musician.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.